Hello, everyone. Welcome back to St. Louis Teens, and welcome back to our Election 2020 series. We are here today with Mr. Laurence Tucker, who is the senior counsel at the Armstrong Teasdale law firm and a former president of the Missouri Bar. Mr. Tucker, you are a strong advocate for the importance of voting for our judges. Thank you so much for your service to our democracy, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Tucker, for an 18-year-old who is still in high school or just graduated or in college, who has minimal knowledge of the law or judicial system, it's often overwhelming to see several judges on the ballot, and it might almost feel like another high school quiz. How do you think that first-time voters can start thinking of the process of voting for their judges?
I think the first thing that any voter needs to do is to try to find out as much as possible about the candidates, whatever the office may be, that they're going to be voting on. And fortunately, we have some resources available for any voter, 18 or older, where people can learn more about the candidates that are up for retention as judges in this election.
And Mr. Tucker, millions of Americans leave the judges' questions blank on the ballot. Why is casting a vote on the judges so important?
Well, we have to distinguish between a couple of different kinds of elections for judges. In Missouri, we have judges in the rural counties who are actually running for office on partisan tickets, much like any other candidate would be. In the cities like St. Louis and Kansas City and Springfield, we have judges that are running on what are called nonpartisan tickets, where they're not either Republican or Democrat, and they're standing for what's called retention. So it's important, I think, in each case for people to know as much about the person who's up for office and to try to evaluate whether they're doing their job and serving the third of the three branches of government that we participate in electing. We already elect all the people in the executive branch and the legislative branch. And in Missouri, we also have an opportunity to contribute to who serves as our judges.
And Mr. Tucker, you talked about it a little bit already, but can you give another brief overview of the process of selecting and appointing judges in Missouri, and who are the judges that appear on the ballot?
I'll be glad to. You know, in Missouri since 1940, we've had a split system where some of our courts are selected by nominating by parties, party politics and partisanship, and some are in a nonpartisan process. And let me explain that process in St. Louis, Kansas City, and Springfield. And for all of our appellate judges, whether they be the Missouri Supreme Court or the intermediate court called the Court of Appeals, they are selected through a process where people apply for a judgeship. Their applications are vetted by a commission made up of lawyers and non-lawyers, and a panel of three judges or three candidates are presented to the governor for the governor's appointment. So in the nonpartisan court process that we have in the major cities and for all of our appellate judges, that's how we get the judges that end up on the retention election ballot. But the other part of that is, in Missouri, once you've been appointed as a new judge, you must stand for retention election at the next general election after your appointment. And then every so many years, depending upon what kind of court you're in, you're called back up for review by the populace.
And Mr. Tucker, you talked about it at the beginning that each person sort of does the research ahead of time and makes sure that they're aware, of each judge and the platforms essentially. What are some of the factors that one should consider while evaluating and voting for judicial candidates, and how can you differentiate between the two candidates, whether it's by party or partisanship or another manner as well?
It's harder in the partisan setting because it's natural in partisan elections for candidates to want to distinguish themselves and contrast themselves with their opponent. In a nonpartisan election, there is no opponent. And I can speak probably more effectively to that than to the partisan elections because we have resources available to help people understand who those judges are in the nonpartisan setting in a way I think it's very helpful. And let me be specific. The nonpartisan judges who are up for election this year, and there are over 50 this
Wow.
year that are on ballot across the state. Each county will have a smaller number than that, but the total is over 50. Those judges are profiled, their biographies are made available, some information about them are made available, and the recommendations of a review commission, which I will talk about in a second, are also posted in a website called yourmissouri.judges.org, which is a great resource for anybody who wants to know more about those judges who are up for election or retention in the nonpartisan plan.
And you gave an example of one place where people could find these resources. Are there any other manners through which people can find these resources to help them learn more about this process and about the judges that they'll be voting for?
I think it's they also can do other things. They can look for other kinds of commentary that may be out there about the judges. Often newspapers will make some sort of commentary about the judges who are up for retention or for election, and they are certainly ought to be reading newspapers or other news outlets that are trying to provide some sort of information about the work done by the people who are being voted on. It's very difficult, though, given the fact that some of these judges are sitting in courts where they have very, very busy dockets and they deal with very, very ordinary and mundane sort of legal matters for every voter to know what exactly they do. But the best things to look for are publicly available and reliable sources, ones that are not skewed heavily one way or the other. That's why I suggested looking at that website, which has actually been put together by the Judicial Performance Review Committee, on which I sit, which is a committee made up of 10 lawyers and 10 non-lawyers and chaired by another lawyer. And we are a creature of the Missouri Supreme Court and the Missouri Bar, and our whole aim is to try to give unbiased evaluations.
And how do you think, Mr. Tucker, that more government and elected officials can be more interactive with teens and youth and make the ballot and voting process more friendly for them?
I think it's important for anybody who's going to be up for public review or election or retention to make themselves available on a regular basis to meet with and talk to groups of interested voters, teens or older, and so they can talk about what the work is they do and how they approach the work that they have, whether they're a legislator, a member of the executive branch, or a judge. In fact, I think it's one of the strong things about the Missouri judiciary that I've seen over the years is they've always been publicly committed, strongly committed to making themselves available to talk about the work of their courts.
And what is your advice for teens and youth, and how can they be more involved and be a part of the solution?
I think every time that a teen or a youth can know more about what is at issue in the elections, they become much more likely to be part of the solution. And I think that's a matter of a lot of self education, spending time trying to learn about what the issues are, what are the really important factors that may play into any decision they have to make. Let me talk for just a moment about the judiciary. We, under, we often see stories in the press about high profile cases and contentions about what the United States Supreme Court, for instance, may do with an issue. But you know, most of the work of courts are pretty routine, but very vitally important to a stable and productive society. So it's important to understand what they do, not only exactly what the cases are all about, but just the nature of the work that every one of those judges take on a daily basis. So I think it's up to each voter, youth, teen, at any age, to do all they can to be as informed as they possibly can be about the people they're going to be voting on.
And for all the viewers, local officials and local policies have a huge impact on our day-to-day life, and it is important to cast your vote on every ballot measure and take the time to learn about them. Mr. Tucker, thank you so much for helping us understand the process of voting for our judges, giving us the tools to make informed decisions on November 3rd. And thank you so much for your time today and answering all of our questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it.